Hello and good evening. Tonight we have an extra special evening, which is a kind of dynamic Pecha Kucha. First of all, welcome to the first of our fall lecture series. This is one of our signature 100-year events, but is also the first of our general lecture series. The 100-year events were an attempt to look at the rich legacy of USC and think about the different categories of influence. One of the emerging ones is the idea of what our own future is. And this was the Design Forward catalog, was really the idea of looking towards our tenure track, the kind of future senior faculty of our school and their diverse ideas, where they are in their youthful exuberance, and to share with the community the kind of excitement that surrounds them. So we're using the Pecha Kucha format, which is traditionally 20 images each for 20 seconds. So we move very, very quickly. I'm told some of them have actual timers, some do not, so we'll have to keep everybody honest. I will be the kind of ringleader, the circus entertainer in between, and we'll try to briefly give everybody an intro bio. I actually have 100 words from each person, so I will try and read those while we are changing up and keep the evening moving. So, with that, it is my great pleasure to start with Dean Qingyun Ma, who really needs no introduction, but nonetheless has a great one, so I'll give it. He is a designer, an educator, and an advocate for creative communities. He's been dean here at USC since 2007. He has numerous accolades, but he's been named one of the world's most influential designers by Business Week. He is principal of Mata Spam, whose firm's work has innovatively transformed urban dynamics and fostered social interaction. He likes and makes, and in no specific order, wine, art, and architecture. His newest venture, CAN, Culture, Agriculture, Nature, applies design innovation to benefit disadvantaged agricultural communities, and just opened at the Venice Biennale. Ma received his BS in Civil Engineering from Tsinghua University and his MArch from the University of Pennsylvania. Warm welcome.
Can we not count what I'm saying now for the 20 seconds? I just wanted to... It's too fast. Okay. So welcome again. I'm really humbled to be part of this 100-year event. Also nervous because it's getting more and more difficult to talk about my life and design because it's so splitted. So maybe the 20 seconds is the best way. So then I don't have to be so organized. Do I time this? Oops. Oh. It's just playing. Oh, play already. So this is me, Lantian man, Homo sapien, drinking wine in an open field. Does it automatic? Oh. So this is actually the plan of the whole area where wine and architecture and agriculture are combined together. This is the building that's in that cluster of building. Obviously, without the idea of how to make the door, only know how to make the wall. So the door was tested multiple times with a lot of stones around it. So eventually it has to set in some manner. There's a lot of stones, and stones has to be all made into different pieces. This is actually lights and speakers around the property, and it's actually cut like that. So all the bricks and all the stones has to be fit together with the right traditional details, but without really drawings, sketches only to send to the peasants. This is the finished one, so actually attract girls as well. So that was me and talking with, and so the ambition. So the kind of success of the ambition goes beyond the field. Now we're actually tackling the town center. So we, with the wine, we want to do a center of the countryside. This was the sketch, and this is the rendering. So it's following the Roman tradition, make it very dense and walled compound in the middle of the countryside. Probably didn't notice there's a highway coming across this. I see that as a Roman aqueduct instead of a highway. So we actually have this underneath the highway for free. That became the new road to the vineyards, to the buildings that on the left on the hill. So, and then we extended this kind of value-added agricultural and town planning over China. This is actually in Shandong, another town. Also on the south-facing slope with towns and vineyards. And then a lot of work in countryside. Sometime this is actually a tent series on the USC notepad. So this is where we actually make liqueur, fruit wine, actually mostly open in the open field. That tent is going to be erected in the courtyard. Now we're moving to Yangon, Myanmar, the capital of Myanmar. We're doing maybe now the biggest and tallest building there. This is the sketch, really a big, gigantic urban block, and carving and roading out into different apartments, hotels, and this is it's now being reviewed by the Urban Review. Oh, this is wrong order. This is actually the tent will be in the courtyard among this pink flower orchard. This is all peach orchard. This is a planning for the capital of Equatorial Guinea. They're moving the capital from coastal city to inland. We're actually planning the capital of the whole country. That's the last of it. Thank you.
Great. Next is Alexander Robinson. Alex is an assistant professor here in the landscape architecture program. He's principal of the studio or landscape architecture and director of the landscape morphologies lab. His research and practice explores the growing role of performance and infrastructure within landscape architecture. He co-authored Living Systems, Innovative Materials and Technologies for Landscape Architecture, and has worked professionally on a range of projects, including the LA River Revitalization Master Plan. Robinson's a graduate of Swarthmore and received his MLA from Harvard's Graduate School of Design.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you. I have more than 20 slides, but I'll be under 6 minutes. Much of my work, my academic research orbits around improving the design of landscape infrastructures, more often than not from the approach of reappropriating top-down engineering and design methodologies. In this capacity, I work on the LA River, and I'm currently finishing a project for the Owens Lake. However, tonight I'm going to share something a little bit different, something from a different playbook. This is a project about instigating design from the bottom up. This is lo-fi and user-generated, and a great means to shift the sometimes stiff trajectories of professional design and engineering services. The following is a proposal I used to compete in the 2013-2050 Goldhirsch Foundation contest, the first iteration of what Jose is currently competing in. The entry was a finalist by popular vote, but wasn't selected for the $100,000 grant. I was a leader in a team called the River Landing Collective. We refers to the collective. The project is about the banks of the Los Angeles River. We think it's really important that Los Angeles starts using this space as soon as possible, so we are proposing an expedition. This 51-mile river of concrete, backdrop to innumerable Hollywood dystopians, is a bit like the moon, inhospitable to most life and almost as hard to access, legally that is. But instead of no oxygen and zero gravity, it's bureaucratic red tape and seasonal flooding that keeps visitors from enjoying what is our city's greatest unclaimed open space opportunity. It's not just that the banks of the river are huge, nearly the size of Central Park altogether, but due to their central accessibility, they have the potential to surpass the beach and mountains as the most valued public space in the city. So let's just rip out that concrete and put in a park. Well, not so fast. The trouble is that our river looks the way it does for a reason. We need the water from rainstorms to move quickly, or else we risk flooding the city. For this reason, the ways in which we can modify the river will always be limited. The river will never be a completely natural space. The exciting thing is that right now there are a lot of engineers and a few designers working to modify the river. In fact, the Army Corps just approved a $1 billion project to restore part of the LA River. However, this is only for 11 miles of the 51 miles of the river, and implementing their ideas and plans for the rest of the river may take a very long time. No one really knows how long. Also, since the river will never be totally natural, how do we decide what it should become? Some people don't even know that the river exists. Do we just have to wait until a new river is unveiled in some distant future? River Landing Collective says no. We propose that we should use this time to test ways we can inhabit the riverbanks. River Landing proposes that each summer, until the river is permanently modified, we build river landings that make the river inhabitable now. This will help immediate open space shortages and teach us what kind of river we actually want. We think that the current vision for the river is limited to ideas of what a natural river should be and doesn't reflect the tremendous urban nature opportunity at hand. Our landing prototypes can help build a consensus to change the controlling design culture and laws restricting use. However, it's not easy to change any part of the river channel. The channel is wrapped in red tape and is seasonally dangerous. A first important step is going on now. A multi-agency program allows kayakers to legally enter the river channel in the summer. This is a huge step forward, but actually occupying the banks is an even more radical idea. Access to the banks is illegal, and their safe use is not clear to the managing entities. River Landing is the first prototype for inhabiting the banks now. However, only approved film crews and casts can legally access this space, so we plan on using a film permit to enable us to build and document this first landing. The design for our movie will create safe access from the top of the banks to a literal river landing. Along the banks, there will be occupiable spaces, and we will test out various ways to temporarily inhabit the concrete slope. The design will be influenced by community input and surveys of river users. Because this kind of occupation is only legally possible as a film shoot, the local community, river stakeholders, and other interested citizens will be cast to be in our multi-day or week film happenings about inhabiting the river in this new way. From this prototype, we will learn not only what works and what doesn't, but will lead the way for river communities and the city to move forward with a summer-long public version. This is pretty much how parking space parklets were implemented. It's a bottom-up strategy that has been successful in difficult urban conditions. The larger aspiration is that these temporary installations will proliferate all along the river and embody various forms and ideas that we may have never dreamed of, while still leaving plenty of room for habitat and natural function. And when it comes time for the river planners to ask us what kind of river we do want, we'll have experienced the river firsthand and know its true potential to become the premier open space of Los Angeles. Neil Armstrong said when he landed on the moon, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." We say, a small set of steps for a river, a giant step for Los Angeles. Thank you. The project continues, and this is the team that I was part of, and we're building prototypes.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Next is Ken Breisch. Ken is an assistant professor in the graduate program of Heritage Conservation, a program he actually founded in 1999 and directed until 2011. He has a PhD in art history from the University of Michigan and is author of the book Henry H.H. Richardson and the Small Public Library in America, and just finished a book commissioned by the Library of Congress entitled The Library in America, Images from the Library of Congress. He's also currently completing a history of the Los Angeles Public Library System.
Well, I started it in the last 6 seconds. Invisible to patrons of the Los Angeles Public Library until it was replaced with a facsimile following fires in 1986 is a Greek inscription engraved on the wrist of a golden hand that held a torch over its central tower. Like the Greek graffiti that the narrator of Victor Hugo's novel Notre Dame de Paris observed in the tower of that cathedral. Good start. Observed in that cathedral, the letters that translate as lamp at the LA Library serve as a key to understanding the building. Rising over the city, this simple epigraph and the torch served as symbols of the library, as well as its iconographic program, which was based on the theme, The Light of Learning. Designed by architect Bertram Goodhue, working with sculptor Lee Lowry and the philosopher Hartley Burr Alexander, the library opened in 1926. Together, these men developed a complex iconography for the building, and Goodhue and Lowry continued to evolve the unique integration of sculpture and architecture they had introduced several years earlier at the Nebraska State Capitol. Several chapters in the book that I'm now completing attempt to explain both the style and meaning of the public library within the theoretical framework of Hartley Burr Alexandra and William Letheby, an English architect and theorist whom Goodhue greatly admired. In Los Angeles, Goodhue, Lowry, and Alexander developed an interplay of metaphors relating to the meaning and function of the library, but also to the history of world culture, religion, and mythology, topics that also interested Letheby. Here we see, for example, a book encircled with the aura of enlightenment, flanked by personifications of the thinker and the writer. And here, Phosphor and Hesper, the morning and evening stars, representing the intellectual traditions of the East and West, with the names of the individuals representing the world's great religions and philosophies. Between them, a horseman symbolically passed the flame of knowledge as codified in these traditions and cultures from, quote, people to people through successive ages. Like Alexander, Letheby believed that through historical and mythological allusions and symbols, one could convey ideas not easily communicated through language. Architectural style, he wrote, derived from the influence of the known and imagined facts of the universe on architecture, or their worldview in the form of their sacred buildings and shrines. Central to Letheby's concepts, and this is his book here from the late 19th century, were the archetypal forms that appear in early mythologies, such as the idea of the world tree, the ziggurat as sacred mountain, or the dome of the cosmos. This thing is going by itself here for some reason. Oh, is it on the timer still? Oh, okay. I was told it wasn't on a timer. Now I get it. These architectural forms were shared by multiple cultures and transcended through historical time and place to a core body of knowledge that was universal and valid for all. What Letheby called the temple idea, in addition to the elaborate architectural program that ornamented the exterior of Goodhue's building, Letheby's ideas came to a dramatic conclusion in Goodhue's great concrete dome, which rises 64 feet above the floor of what was the delivery room of the library. Extending back to the Pantheon and beyond, the dome had long been understood as an architectural symbol of the cosmos, and Letheby identified the cosmic dome, or ceilings like the sky, as one of his central temple ideas. So powerful was the concept, he observed, that its mythological memory was preserved well into the Renaissance in texts such as Tommaso Campanella's The City of the Sun, where the central temple is described as circular and domed with a large globe representing the earth suspended from the vault over the altar. In Los Angeles, the earth is fashioned as in translucent blue glass and is suspended from the dome, while signs of the zodiac circle around it. Images of the planets and a crescent moon hang from the chains above it, which in turn are suspended from the center of an image of the sun at the top of the dome. The central theme of the dome, the sun and its golden red corona, derived from plate 4, actually, of Johannes Salarius's Harmonia Microcosmia, which was published in 1661. This represented a view of the Copernican solar system in which, as the astronomer hypothesized in 1543, the Earth, Moon, and other planets revolve around the sun. In Los Angeles, this theme was depicted by Julian Garnsey with almost identical gold rays encircled with a wreath of stars and a halo of silver spikes. Where the Earth and Moon orbit the sun at the top of the Salarius print, however, the globe in Los Angeles is suspended beneath it. Ironically, by placing it in the center of the dome, however, the architects have again placed the Earth at the center of the universe, which runs in the face of Copernicus's ideas. With a similar let's see, Goodhue also depicted, or Lee Lowry also depicted, as you can see here on the right, Copernicus with a mechanical model of the universe, and earlier had depicted it as a bronze disk at the National Academy of Sciences in Washington. The idea of the cosmos likewise evoked multiple analogies for Hartley Alexander, who in interpreting Plato considered it as a realm of order and reason. Had we not have been endowed with the sense of sight, he quotes Timaeus, we would have never seen the stars, the sun, and the heavens, never have been able to describe the universe or develop the power to inquire into its nature. It was this that led to our perceptions of the heavens, gave us our measures of time, and created number and science, as represented, for example, on the facade of the library, as you can see here. In Los Angeles, the model of the firmament rests beneath the central pyramid of the library, which is itself bejeweled on each of its four sides with an image of the sun. The pyramid, Alexander notes in his essay on Plato's cosmology, represented the first of four basic elements created from the mother substance, from which God shaped form and number. Rising above this is the torch of knowledge. In Hugo's novel Notre Dame, the entire narrative was generated from an obscure Greek inscription meaning fate, a word that would disappear soon after it was observed by the book's narrator. In a parallel manner, the similarly obscure Greek inscription atop Goodhue's tower likewise serves as a key to understanding the library's great iconographic narrative.
All right. Next is Allison Hirsch, who's a landscape architectural designer as well as an urban historian and theorist. Both her design and written work focus on public histories and politics of urban settlement, as well as how human corporeality and movement can provide a stimulus for design. Prior to joining the faculty here at USC, she taught landscape architecture and theory and design at Harvard's GSD, the UVA, and the University of Toronto. Her book, titled City Choreographer, Lawrence Halprin and Urban Renewal America, was just released by the University of Minnesota Press in April, and it received grant support from the Foundation for Landscape Studies and the Graham Foundation. The book provides an analysis of the creative processes of Lawrence Halprin, developed with his wife, dancer, and choreographer Anna Halprin, and how aspects of this process have the potential to enrich contemporary approaches to structuring the city. Allison is also co-founder of Foreground Design Agency, a transdisciplinary practice operating between the fields of architecture, landscape architecture, urbanism, and the visual arts.
I'll also be talking really quickly to fit into the time restraints. I don't know where the slides are. Are they just here in this folder? Or? Oh, okay, thanks. So my partner Rusiak Gabrielian and I, she's in the back, we recently reframed our work through the lens of the body. So the following is slides will be read as a kind of manifesto to landscape and corporeality. Human proportion, the body's structure, and its systems provided the authoritative foundation for Western architectural thought since antiquity. While landscape architecture has relied heavily on architecture's theoretical footing, probing the relationships of landscape, the field's primary medium, and the human body, diversifies the discourse and poses new areas of inquiry through which to move forward. Rather than look back at the body as a nostalgic source of orientation and knowable scale, we examine the body's potential role as agent or generator of new forms of territorial transformation at all scales. We welcome the conflicts and instabilities embedded in the term landscape and use these areas of ambiguity as fuel for our creative practice and corporal inquiries. With its etymological associations with scenery and the scopic, landscape has been associated with the detached observer who imposes an illusion of order and control on space through its careful composition. But this sense of corporal detachment clearly comes into conflict with the physical practices of settlement and inhabitation associated with the term's Germanic root Landschaft, where Schaft is related to the verb schaffen, to shape, thus signifying a creative and embodied practice. The term is yet further complicated by its prefix land, a word bearing strong political content as an area of ground defined by lawful boundaries, thus implying occupation and labor as sort of an embodied presence, as well as power and conflict, which are forces ultimately inscribed on the culturally constituted body. We revel in these complexities and tensions of landscape as a physical, political, representational, and ideational medium. In landscape architecture, the primary lens through which we understand landscape is the material, the land as shaped by dynamic processes. As a spatio-temporal medium, this landscape is in the constant state of becoming. Its transformative nature and its horizontal orientation can only be understood in movement and through time, in other words, in full bodily or kinesthetic presence. Yet the lack of resolution over the meaning of landscape provokes questions about its relationship to the body. Architectural discourse has long since abandoned the body as a model of unity or harmonic proportion, recognizing instead the body as contested ground, a sociocultural artifact. We probe the body as a continued means of combating Cartesian dualisms through the ideal of the corps vécu, or the lived body, and as an empowered instrument of identity, inverting Foucault's docile body. Yet landscape and nature has long been associated with the docile body as soft, passive, and neutral ground, awaiting the figure to endow it with purpose and order. We reject this characterization. In our practice, just as landscape is an active agent of culture and creativity, the body most essentially becomes an instrument of environmental participation and performance. So through the following 5 landscape provocations, we prioritize the agency of the sentient and social body. The projects are presented from those that emphasize the body in full sort of kinesthetic presence, to the body contorted by sociocultural forces, to ultimately the body as mediated by technological progress. In urban transgressions, our bodies became the medium through which we read and restructured the urban territory. More specifically, through the aesthetic practices of walking, we explored and reframed the symbiosis that exists between the grid of Manhattan and the resilient street that predated and transgressed it, Broadway. This kinesthetic appropriation of arguably the city's most dynamic street revealed tactical opportunities for spatial and durational intervention. So for instance, on the left side, you see the sort of register of our walk down the entire length of Broadway, for which we took a photographic sequence every time the grid intersected with Broadway. Next to it, we actually extracted the rhythm of our access to the horizon along this walk, which informed an intervention that diversified our bodily relationship to the ground and sky within the density of the grid. In Garden as Garment, the physical landscape becomes a seamless vegetative blanket that both engulfs and insulates. By allowing ourselves to be fully enveloped in the garden, we release control and become part of our habitational field rather than separate from it. Responding to the performance art lineage, clothing oneself in the garden becomes part of the process of immersive engagement, as does the collective act of wearing this common cloak, creating a new and shifting topography based on shared experience. In our rhythm analysis studies, we visualize rituals and transcultural practices of urban settlement to generate designs that enforce, propel, and transform such expressions of identity in the public realm. The research considers ritual not as solely an agent of collectivity or cohesion, but as a vehicle of conflict or contestation, a means of appropriating and spatializing the city in new culturally determined and hybrid ways. These new forms of ethnographic visualization demonstrate how the spatio-temporal medium of landscape is best represented through durational means. Recipe Landscape, Reinstating Collective Ritual is a reconsidered proposal for the future of the Pruitt-Igoe site, the original proposal for which was a prize winner in the Pruitt-Igoe Now competition. In the proposal, the body is no longer a common vessel of experience, but one that is gendered and racialized and misshaped further by cultural history and memory of place. As an instrument of control, adult men were restricted from living in the Pruitt-Igoe housing towers, making it a place composed of almost entirely female, black female-headed households. So pulling from the work of Bell Hooks on blackness, femininity, and place identity, the proposal reinstates and reimagines some of the positive attributes of the place prior to its devolution as a productive landscape of collective ritual and domestic life, while introducing programs of education and entrepreneurship. So this last investigation is actually the current focus of Arusiak's initial studies in the IMAP PhD program at the USC School of Cinematic Arts. She'll actually be presenting this research at the Mediated Cities Conference in October here in LA. Mediated Visions questions the notion that with the rise of digital technology, the body becomes less and less consequential. Ours is not a romantic plea to reinstate the body as primary medium of being in the world, but a set of inquiries that try to unpack the body's relationship to technology, particularly as related to how we perceive and experience landscape through developing navigational technologies. The design research readdresses the etymology of the term landscape, unpacking its dual natures as a distanced representation of the embodied world and as the body's primary medium of encounter and immersion. It is through our research practice foreground that we have been able to revisit the body as an active agent of design. To foreground means to bring forward or bring close, reflecting our commitment to the body scale and offering enriched opportunities for enhanced participation in the environment. Thanks.
Erik Carlson has a PhD from Caltech, where he researched the Northridge earthquake and is a consultant at Simpson, Gumpert, and Hager. He's consulted with the governments of Singapore and China regarding assessment of existing building stocks for seismic considerations. His main research focus is seismic sustainability and resilience of buildings, their components, and their contents. This new approach to evaluating performance could broadly impact how designers and planners make important decisions regarding cost and sustainability, and how buildings and planning codes could consider the influence of moderate earthquakes on building performance and how we detail and build our buildings in seismic country.
You may have noticed that I got the only non-symmetric shape of the speakers, and I think that has something to do with architects asking me to engineer the buildings on the right. But today I'd like to talk about the odd shape in the middle, which is Los Angeles and all its buildings. The Northridge earthquake happened 20 years ago. The shaking that everyone felt lasted shorter than this slide is going to last. $20 billion of damage in less than 20 seconds, $1 billion per second. We don't want to see this again. In the fall, some reporters started doing an expose of research being done by Northern Californians about our building stock here in Southern California, and pointing out that we have a lot of dangerous buildings that are at risk. This got the attention of your mayor, that I would like to introduce now, Mayor Garcetti, who puts the progress in progressive, and Dr. Lucy Jones, AKA the Earthquake Lady, who he hired this year to help identify and maintain the seismic resilience of Los Angeles. The problem we have is that we have a public that does not understand building codes and does not understand earthquakes. And so a lot of people, even people spending tens of millions of dollars on buildings, think those buildings have already been tested because there's been a few earthquakes. Downtown has not really felt an earthquake yet. Here's the 20-second lesson. The code designs for life safety. That's it. Not better, not worse. If you pay extra money, you can design for these other things. On the bottom is the energy released in an earthquake. An 8.0 releases 1,000 times more energy than a 6.0. But the shaking could be worse in a 6.0. So there's a lot of data out there. The research I'm doing is putting data together from all these sources in ways that people haven't done before, with the help of GIS and colleagues here at USC, and Lucy Jones. I'd like to advance it. There we go. So one of the things we know about is our building stocks, and two of the types that have been identified by the mayor's office to address are non-ductile concrete buildings that you see on the left. I'm not saying which ones on Broadway are in that range. And on the right, soft story or tuck under apartment buildings. We also have a lot of data on historic earthquakes in Southern California. These 4 earthquakes have all changed our code, and they have all been moderate earthquakes, not strong, not great, not big. We also know where a lot of the faults are, all those red lines you see crossing through the city, and unknown ones. Northridge was not a known fault, and we can run simulations on them so we can predict the types of shaking buildings are going to see for future events and add that to the database as well. I went to the LA Public Library that Ken told you about and collected a lot of this information, and I'm identifying, if you know what year the building was built, then you can figure out what seismic force it was designed for, add that into the database as well. Before 1927, buildings weren't designed for earthquakes. So the idea of my research is an interactive seismic map of Los Angeles. You could type in an address, find out the strongest shaking that building has felt, find out what it's been designed for, and figure out what it might see in your lifetime. So let's say you work in City Hall like Mayor Garcetti. The 3 earthquakes on the top, that's the type of shaking that they actually cause downtown. The 3 on bottom are faults near downtown that, as you can see, could cause much stronger shaking than downtown has felt yet. This graphic is of the concrete buildings that were inspected after the Northridge earthquake. So these non-ductile ones that Northern California researchers are worried about. Well, a lot of them did survive the earthquake, but we can start correlating data with known shaking for specific building types. This is an image of buildings over 50 feet tall, so you can see, some boulevards in the valley as well as downtown and Wilshire Quarter, etc. So, and then looking at velocities. Velocities affect tall buildings more than they do short buildings. So we can start developing different ways to see how the data fits together. This is the inspections from Northridge, but imagine we get an earthquake, within seconds we know where the fault was. We've already got a simulation for it. We can predict where there's going to be damage and have emergency responders be more effective by going to areas where we would expect more damage. So why are Garcetti and Jones smiling? Because they're taking action. And you're going to expect the LA City Council to vote on ordinances for soft-story buildings, for non-ductile concrete buildings, and the mayor's considering a seismic rating system that the U.S. Resilience Council is developing with the Structural Engineers Association of California. And you could get tags on your buildings instead of for green design, for how safe they are, what kind of repair costs they're going to have, and how long it's going to be before you're going to be able to move back in. I'm sure insurance companies are happy about this coming up. Who knew that it would be dangerous to buy art supplies for a class? This is one of the several thousand URM buildings in California that haven't been retrofitted yet. The state in 1986 said they all had to be retrofitted, but they left it up to the local cities to decide when and how to do that. Napa earthquake just a month ago is actually a success story. In 2000, they had a voluntary retrofit. Only 22% got retrofitted. 2 people died in the Paso Robles earthquake. So in 2006, they made it mandatory. Only 3 URM buildings weren't retrofitted. They were all damaged and hit some neighboring buildings too. Thank you.
Jose Sanchez is an architect, programmer, game designer, who's also a tenure-track assistant professor. His research, Gamescapes, explores interactive interfaces in the form of video games, speculating in modes of intelligent augmentation, combinatorics, and open systems as a design medium. He's co-curator of the Bloom Project, winner of the Wonder Series, hosted by the City of London for the 2012 Olympics, which has been exhibited in diverse places around the world, such as the Archilab exhibition of naturalizing architecture in Orléans, France. The future is here and soon coming to USC in a few weeks. His practice, the Plethora Project, brings together research, design, and education, investing in the future of online open source knowledge.
Hi, my practice is called the Plethora Project, and I'm going to make a talk entitled The Abundance of Design Ideas. The keyword here is the idea of abundance, which is the opposite of scarcity, right? And it's not just about sustaining what we have, but rather to think about how to create more. I'm going to start by sharing 2 video games that I played when I was a kid. Those are SimCity and Lemmings. These 2 games are about creating something and building something, right? Specifically about combining things in different ways. A player was always a designer of systems. Also, when I was studying architecture, I was very influenced by the Whole Earth catalog, who was published in the 70s. It was a catalog about DIY tools It's an example of what we would call today the maker movement. It was about sharing ideas and collaboration. It wasn't a utopian project. And it was thinking about how a collective could find solutions about energy-efficient living. The moment in which I had the chance to start my own practice, these ideas were crucial. Open source and community, the creation of systems and tools of combinations. I'm interested in collective intelligence, providing teaching tools and building blocks to others. However, I felt that the work in my practice has some pieces missing. The various ingredients that constitute the project remain isolated, and the goal to create this activate this collective intelligence were not there yet. They were not working. However, I could see these initiatives like Minecraft doing it successfully online. Minecraft is a video game with a community of over 70 million players. The video game is actually both educational and creative. Minecraft has successfully created an abundance of design ideas, as I thought, creating an open-ended system of combinations. Minecraft is a game about the economy of resources and the patterns that players create. The result of this is not just a catalog, as we've seen before, but a network, a vast network that only can be explored by thousands of players. The peculiarities or design outcomes live beyond the expectations of any designer. Somehow I needed some evidence that this could be applied to the real world. The game Folded actually provided such evidence. That was a game created by scientists to solve scientific problems. It's a puzzle game where you basically find solutions about protein folding problems. 2 weeks after its release, a player discovered solutions that were unknown to scientists at the time. So how can we apply these ideas to architecture? This was precisely what I was aiming to pursue. Design a video game that could understand the ecology of the city. Block, the title of the video game I'm developing, it's a building game that models relationships between architectural objects. There are simple units that represent housing, public space, commerce, farming, parking, parks, etc. By combining, a player can design and create potential city blocks. Oops, I think we just crashed. Let me just... Right. So as I said, the game, oh, sorry. That's unfortunate. I'm going to try to skip that one. Okay, let's hope that we can continue. Sorry about that. The game is greatly influenced by the plant in Chicago, which is an urban city farm, an urban farm. Its focus is mainly about minimizing waste. Right? The way in which it does this is how to think of how one entity basically, it's the waste of one entity becomes the resource for another one. Basically, it's modeling an ecological system of interdependence. I believe that architecture could be designed in a similar way. Every asset in the city, such as a shop, needs resources to exist, but it also produces something to the city, thinking about inputs and outputs of different elements. Energy is a fundamental currency of the city. The key issue here is, in order to create meaningful patterns for a game, is to understand the productive properties of building blocks available to us. As a designer, we want to know the impact of our designs. We want to know how the ecosystem would change if we, for example, would create an urban farm or a solar array. The video game block will give everyone the tools to model such systems without any previous architectural knowledge. Architects often fall in the trap of looking at architecture through one particular lens. Block tries to look at the city through multiple lenses, simulating ecological interdependence, how systems are intrinsically entangled. I consider games to be a medium for the 21st century. Games are a dynamic medium that allow for systemic thinking. Games have a global and committed audience, and architectural design has the potential to tap into these great minds. The outcome of game is not the work of one, but a collective enterprise. Games are the medium to create collective intelligence. Games are the mediums to create community, the place where thousands of players can share not only thoughts, but operational ideas for the cities of tomorrow. And perhaps potentially, we could really think of an abundance of design ideas. The project, as I presented it today, it's running for a grant called MyLA 2050, representing USC, and we're hoping to get $100,000 if we actually succeed. We are running second, just behind UCLA, so I would encourage everybody to vote. We have 5 days left, and with that, thank you.
Next is Dr. Jun-Ho Choi, an assistant professor of building science. Prior to joining USC, he worked at the Department of Civil, Architectural, and Environmental Engineering at Missouri University of Science and Technology. He earned his PhD in building performance and diagnostics at Carnegie Mellon University. Dr. Choi's primary research interests are in the areas of advanced controls for high-performance buildings, biosensing controls in the built environment, smart building enclosure, passive building strategies, human-centered building environmental control, building systems integration, environmental sustainability, and comprehensive post-occupancy evaluation, indoor environmental quality, and human health and work productivity.
Thank you. Actually, I sent the more shorter version to the Joss, but I think he forgot the update. Okay.
You should have it here on the right.
Okay, my name is Jun Ho Choi. I'm an assistant professor of building science in the School of Architecture. So actually, I'd like to share one of my research directions with you guys. So let me start with this image. Actually, it is a kind of the popular movies in Korea when I was very young. So left one is 엄마 없는 하늘 아래. The English title could be No Mother Under the Sky. And the right one is that 엄마 찾아 산말리 is like a kind of traveling 30,000 miles to find my mother. So the funny thing is that the left one is that the guy is always mocked by his peers, and he always just punched by another friend, and the other one is he traveling alone to find her mother. So actually the funny thing is that I always wonder about why the Korean mother always missing. So it makes me sad, and also when my family watched these movies, my mother cried, my sister cried, and I also cried. But I cannot remember what the lesson was. Okay. So the good thing is that those sad moment was figured out when I saw the Superman or superheroes on TV. So but when I saw the superheroes, I decided to do something good for the world peace. But after that, my life plans dynamically changed. Unfortunately, I was able to land in the architecture domain. So a few years later, actually when I was in college, I did some voluntary service in the regional healthcare facility. So I was able to meet one of the patients. He's almost the same age as me, and then he was suffering from the Lou Gehrig disease. So he always told me that I envy you so much because you can actively run and walk and any type of physical some activity you can do. So, and after that, I had a chance to work in a general hospital, to work as through the internship program. So I was able to see a lot of patients who are very physically limited. They are suffered from the building environmental condition, especially thermal and lighting, because those conditions are 100% decided by the nurse or doctor rather than those patients. So those experiences gave me a very good experience, actually totally changed my viewpoint on the architecture, actually. So, before the experience, I used to just focus on the aesthetic of architecture. But later, I realized that, wow, that there are always people inside. So that is one of the some idea that I focus. Okay, so any type of building, once you open the door, once you get in, you'll be always surrounded by the building indoor environmental quality component, so such as some thermal and acoustic and lighting and air. So the thing is that some people may prefer higher temperature or lower temperature, and the other people may prefer the higher lighting level or lower lighting level. So it is not easy to optimize the one specific condition to meet every occupant's some environmental comfort. So good thing is that even though we have a lot of diversity depending on people, but everyone has the same biological mechanism. So everybody has a brain signal, everyone has an eye movement, everyone has a heartbeat, and blood circulation. So I still remember that about 5 or 4 years ago, when I implemented my research idea using very rough and big sensor, heart rate sensor, so I had to buy some mega size, some sensor. But these days it's really easy to very simply measure your skin temperature or heart rate using just a wristband or wristwatch. So these days, wearable computing is a really, really big some portion of the industry and the market. So computer science and the mechanical engineering and then the electric engineering, they are eager for very fancy and very reasonable priced devices in the market. So the good thing is that the only thing we need to do in the architecture domain is just adopt those current technology and then collect some corresponding biosignals for individual indoor environmental quality component. So every signal is kind of free. So every human body generates such as some free signal. Only thing we need to do is just collect them, translate them, and integrate them with the building systems. So in that way, the human and building always interact, like that way. So based on some research principle, I used to develop the thermal comfort control using some skin temperature and heart rate. And also I use some pupil size to control lighting condition in the building. And considering the modern industry trend, which is the microgrid personal environmental control, so because we have a relatively static condition in the workplace, so we are currently using the facial skin temperature to control your ambient heating or cooling systems. So as I said, indoor environmental quality is one of a big issue because it can affect your individual productivity and the occupant comfort, and also the environmental and energy performance. So as you know that in the modern building, we have a lot of sensing and control the infrastructures. So we are very ready to integrate those advanced technology with our some building design and system integrations. So I believe that this scope of research is a kind of some new research paradigm with the help of the advanced technology. So it is the one way to accomplish occupant physiological benefit and the environmental benefit. Thank you.
Great. Our last speaker of the evening is Hadrian Predock, who was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and received his Master of Architecture from the Harvard Graduate School of Design. and is, of course, our new director of undergraduate programs. His architectural practice, Predock Frame, was co-founded with John Frame, also on our faculty, as a collaborative research and development design studio. The work of their practice ranges from small-scale art projects to large public venues. Seeking to open new territories for locality and specificity, the research-driven projects seek to extract and transfer extra-disciplinary logics into architectural terrain while encouraging site and context to become active and vital agents in shaping material and spatial development.
Thanks, Gail. So when I hit play, this is going to go into a timed mode? Is that what's going to happen? It's not automated. Oh, I can do it. Okay. All right. Thanks for inviting me tonight, Jose. I'm really happy to do this. I think it's kind of appropriate that I'm last because the format that I chose for tonight has to do with the kind of range in our work. And there's been a kind of incredible range tonight so far, which is really exciting to see. So what I chose to do within that kind of format is to work from the smallest project in our office to the largest project. And I've never done this format before, so I thought it would be kind of cool to unpack the convention of a typical lecture and repackage it in that way. So we'll start from small and we'll go large. So, yep, the smallest project in our office is a wig. This is a single strand project. We had this kind of plethora of leftover material from a project that I'll show in a minute, which is called L-Wire, and we were asked to design a kind of garment for a show. So we took it as a kind of opportunity to explore the single strand versus the multi-strand within the context of the mannequin head and produce these different kind of formal bodies that became wigs that produce different kinds of architectural behaviors. The exhibition format for us, we've been in a few different exhibitions, and we always like the exhibition format to kind of be a domain where we can challenge what architecture can do within that format. So here, the model, which was relative to a house project that we worked on, took on a kind of life of its own, and we really saw this as like a project that could have its own autonomy and be considered an object in its own right. Likewise, that's kind of blurry, a drawing here started out as a two-dimensional kind of format and eventually became a kind of three-dimensionalized hybrid between a model and a drawing. So again, we see this as a kind of format that can take on its own autonomy. Gail will recognize these. This is for a show that Gail curated at the Pacific Design Center that was called Material Matters. And we were working within a kind of material production domain called filament winding. And here, we thought of the formwork as being a very kind of dynamic thing. It was inflatables that you could kind of layer onto each other. So the formwork that is normally fairly static and kind of repeatable, here was made plastic and flexible and malleable. So it allowed us to produce this kind of range of shapes. These things are about 6 or 8 feet. And then to introduce color in a kind of like wildly optical spectrum. Jumping up in scale to the kind of furniture range, this was a bench project that we were commissioned to design for Manhattan Beach. We got really interested in fabric-formed concrete within surfers' wetsuits. So we devised these kind of strange bodies that were combined legs together. So they were kind of desexed and turned into these very strange compositions of surfer poses. And we had a whole variety of these that we proposed. They were too scared to build these, but maybe, yeah. Here we have one of several kind of what we call vitrines that we've designed in our office, and they've been in different kinds of exhibitions, and we see these as kind of hovering between different positions in design. On the one hand, they act as a kind of model. On the other hand, a kind of drawing. They suggest interiors and interiority, and they also kind of flirt with installation. So these have been exciting pieces for us to work on. This one's called My Little Sky Pony. And we've done a whole bunch of these. This is a skylight in San Francisco, and here, this is part of a larger project, but this thing became a kind of project in its own right, and we considered the aperture as a kind of, real site and place for elaboration and development within the larger kind of domain of architecture. And this thing took kind of months to design and realize. It's about 10 feet by 5 feet. This is a installation at the Pomona College Museum of Art, and here this is called Inland Empire, and we were interested in the strange array of building typologies in the Inland Empire. At the bottom of this network, you're seeing a typical kind of suburban house scale that's hovering off of the ground, and at the very top of this inverted pyramid is what we were affectionately calling a BAB, a big-ass building. And the ones in the Inland Empire, which are these regional depots, are approaching the largest scale of building on the planet. And that is an actual scalar representation of the size of that building. To give it some context, the thing in the middle is Walmart-sized. This is an installation that we did for the Venice Biennale in 2004. And here we used 7 miles worth of hand-painted monofilament to produce blurring optical effects within the kind of liner of the American Pavilion. And you can also barely make out this datum line that's close to average human eye level, and that is relative to the highest high water mark in Venice from the Acqua Alta flooding. This is a project that we did just about a month and a half ago at the Getty Center. We were commissioned to do this, and it's a super interactive project, which I'll show in a sec with an animation. Essentially, it's a kind of battle between the logics of Richard Meyer and the logics of Robert Irwin. And that'll be kind of self-explanatory in this video, if it shows up. Look, didn't go. It's not showing up, Jose. Any thoughts? Oh, there it goes. Okay, I'll just play a brief part of this. But this is an all-day event where there was a grid of these boxes, and every time a group showed up from the tramway, they were allowed to interact with these boxes. And we did a collaboration with a sound artist, and we'd give people prompts like make a sun, or make a dragon, or make a wall, or make a city. And this played out organically over about 8 hours. This goes on, but it gives you a sense of what the project was like. We had a really fun time doing this, and it was very video game-like in the end. This is stepping up in scale a bit. This was a project that we proposed in Silver Lake for these underutilized urban spaces, and essentially this is a project that was designed to kind of deal with the wet season and the dry season in Los Angeles. It's a kind of tent that catches water and funnels it into these waterbed-like urban benches. So it moves between these modes of being kind of depleted and engorged. This is for the 2010 GLOW Festival in Santa Monica. This is called Luminous Passage, and we consider this our most urban project. We worked on this for 6 months, designing it. We installed it in 3 days, and then it was up for 12 hours, and then it disappeared. It was a pretty exhilarating project to work on, and we are estimating there were maybe between 150 and 200,000 people that moved through this project in one night. And they formed this very controlled line from the beginning and ended up at the ocean. It links the city to the ocean. This is another kind of hybrid project that situates itself between interiors, interiority, exhibition design, and architecture, again at the Getty Center. And this is another kind of like, we're interested in this kind of like dialectic and battle between Meyer's monumental, rationalized, pure grid and Irwin's kind of wild color field. We've done several houses. This is a house in Venice, and this is what we call a kind of aggressive renovation. This is not a ground-up house. This is a renovation that consumes the geometry of the existing house and kind of conceals it within its new body. This is a project in New Mexico that is for a Zen Buddhist monastery. And here we were kind of interested in like kind of the literalism of Zen dialectics, and we took that to heart, and we designed a project that was based in kind of heaviness and lightness. So we have these kind of 30-inch thick heavy earthen walls on one side and very, very thin polycarbonate walls on the other. This is a housing project in Los Angeles. So the basic message behind this one, and I'm going way over on my time, I'm going to go faster, is that there is a kind of plan datum in the project that is non-variable, and there's a highly variable section that produces a randomized facade and elevation. So working with kind of two simple combinatory ideas on an urban project. Stepping up in scale, this is our proposal for the Atlanta Human Rights Museum. And here we were quite interested in a building that was part kind of field and part object. So this is like a geometric mass that emerges out of the ground. And that puts it in a very different kind of relationship to the other buildings that are nearby, like the Coca-Cola Center in Atlanta, that are highly object-based buildings. This is a project in Yaroslav, Russia. This is a World Heritage Site that are full of these incredible onion dome churches. You can see one on the upper left. And the project is to basically house and celebrate the very precious objects that this city houses in its various churches. And we use the onion dome as a kind of like geometer in the project to produce the perimeter line work, to produce these interior spatial objects. And finally, one of our winning entries for the Land Art Generator Initiative, which is a competition that established a relationship between land art and energy generation. So our proposal was basically to take these Cool Earth solar units. These are amazing things. You should look them up. They're these kind of plastic balloons that concentrate solar energy into these hotspots, and to produce a kind of landscape out of it. And it's a landscape that you can kind of occupy and walk through or situate inside of spatially, and forms a kind of art park and a huge energy generation landscape. That's it. Thank you.